the Spectral Freeze algorithm on the disting EX. This is a freeze, kind of infinite sustain sort of effect. The reason it's called a spectral freeze is it's not a looper or a granulator or something which would work kind of in the time domain. This works in the frequency domain by analysing the spectrum, the frequency spectrum of your sound, and resynthesizing it into some sort of texture. So you just heard a bit of a demo, but let's run through it in more detail. It's much easier to understand to begin with if we just double click that and go into this visuals mode, which gives you an idea of what it's looping and where the new loops are going to go. So basically the idea is you feed it some audio. In this case I've got a disting EX in multi-sample playback mode, played through an FH2 using the lab scary strings at the moment. So that's going into the Spectral Freeze stereo output straight into the mixer here. So everything you'll hear is just the raw output of this. You can add some delay and reverb in this algorithm to smooth things up a bit. So like I say, basic usage, give it some sound. That's my scary string. And then with the default mappings, you can press this button and it's just going to capture that segment and loop it again. You press it and it goes away. So play that one. There you go. You'll notice when I'm just using it in this mode, it's moving on to the next one each time I hit freeze, which will make more sense if I change the release, say. So if I change the release to nice and long, maybe change the attack a little bit as well. Then let's go down. Freeze that. And then if I, let's do a higher one. And then double click basically to set that one to release and the next one to freeze. And then that one decays away as the new one arrives. And then decay that one out. So that's using, just get back to the parameters here. So basically you've got those 4 voices and you can freeze into them at your leisure. So the freeze target parameter here is auto in this case. So that was basically every time you hit the freeze, it allocates a new voice and starts freezing into that. If you actually set that to one of the 4 voices, then you can have a bit more control over what you're doing. So if I do that, say, a little T has appeared there to indicate that is now the target for the freeze. Now it's 2, 3, 4. So if I go to 1 and make some sound, freeze that, and then if I want to layer that up, make another sound, and now when I hit freeze, it's gone into that loop. And I can go back to that one, let it go back to that one, let that one go. So that's the basic usage. This is a convenient way to drive it if you want to kind of use this as a performance interface. You can of course control this through CV or MIDI or whatever, and in fact the default mappings are for the 4 individual voice freezes to be mapped from a CV inputs, so you can control when they all freeze or not through a CV and or gate, I guess it would be in fact, or MIDI or I2C or anything you like. So that's the basic freeze, but it can actually do more than freeze because it's capturing a small segment of audio rather than just a moment, and you can move around within that. So you can do kind of slowed down playback or bit shifting stuff as well. So let's explore that a minute. So I'm going to grab a sound, and I'm using the scary strings again because they've got quite a lot of movement within the sound that we're going to be able to hear. Okay, so you'll notice in the display here, there's these two lines going up and down, and that's showing where in the buffer it's moving. So you've got these three controls here: the movement, direction, the rate, and the depth. So the depth at the moment is 2, which basically means it's just alternating between two very nearby sections of audio. 42 milliseconds there is indicating the kind of range over which it's moving. If I change that, then you can go up to nearly 3 seconds. So let's go for about that. And then this is the rate at which it's playing that back. So at the moment it's 0.01 times, so that's 100th of normal speed. So I can change that all the way up to 1 times, which is basically the speed it was played at. So now you can hear the sound that sounds a bit more like the sound I played into it. I'll slow it down. And then the movement parameter at the moment is alternating, which you can very obviously see it's going backwards and forwards. If I change that, go backwards, it'll loop, forwards, it'll loop. Or you can do random walk, where it's just going to kind of always be continuous, but kind of stagger around like a drunken man. And then there's random skip, where it's just going to skip all over the shot. If I slow that down, you can see that going on. And then let's go back to forwards now, just to make the point here. As I mentioned earlier, this isn't a looper, so even if when it's going forwards like that, you're not getting some kind of cross-faded loop when it goes round the join. It's kind of moving its way through the buffer, and then it's kind of, the jump from there to there is just the same as the jump from any one of these other things. It's kind of smoothly interpolating from one position to the other. So now let's just turn that one off. If I choose a different sound, just to make the point that it is kind of going back over quite a period of time. Okay, I've got some piano now. So if I do this, and then there we go. So now it's kind of effectively is looping, though it is interpolating over the join. But I can slow that way down. Random skip is quite interesting here because it's kind of jumping over those 3 notes and playing little bits of them at different times. So that's a rather pleasant drony effect. While that's spinning away there, let me just capture some higher notes as well, and we'll make a nicer texture. I mentioned briefly you can put some effects on this to kind of smush it all up a little bit. There's a delay and there's a reverb, which are the same delay and reverb that you get in a lot of the disting X effects. So if I turn the delay on, an echo going on there. And then if I put on some reverb, then it all starts to become rather textural and lovely. Yeah, possibly too smushy now to even hear what we're doing, so we'll just stop these guys. While we're on effects, there's another couple of parameters up here, delay routing and reverb routing. By default, the delay and reverb are just on the output of the freeze effect, so the dry sound is doesn't have them on. If I do that, so the delay routing is output mix, then my dry signal is going through the delay as well as the freeze signal going through the delay. If I put the reverb on, then the reverb's on that as well, or both. So that's delay and reverb on the dry signal, and then if I freeze it, then the same effects are on the frozen output as well. Which is nice. So what else should we look at? Let's get back down. Now there's a full stereo mixer for all these things as well. Dry gain is the level of the dry signal. So there's a dry gain, there's an overall freeze gain, so that's an overall gain on the 4 voices combined. Combined with that, each voice has its own individual gain and pan. You can imagine that maybe automating the gains with CV or MIDI or whatever would be a nice way to give some interest once you've frozen 4 voices, to have them ebbing and flowing under CV control. Or you can simply use the pans to set up a kind of static sound field. So let's do that just now. So if I put the voice 1 almost hard left, voice 2 a little bit to the left, voice 3 a little bit to the right, and then voice 4 all the way over there. Then when I go through my 4 voices, let's spread some sounds out. So we'll start. So let's change the depth back down to something quite low. There we go. So now our 4 voices are spread out in stereo. And of course you can move those around while they're playing. Like so. So going through what else is available, the attack and release I've mentioned already. Each voice comes and goes under control of these attack and release parameters, which can be quite long. You want a nice smooth glide between your textures. And Etherization is an interesting one. Let's set something up so we can hear how that sounds. Let's go, what should we do? Let's go back to strings, and we'll capture a chord, say, maybe not that high. Right, so what Etherization does is it basically, as you lower it from 127, it sets a threshold for components of the sound that are considered transient rather than stable. So basically the effect is, as you drop it down, you eventually end up with this kind of very small selection of sine waves, basically, that are the strongest harmonic components of that sound, which can sound rather nice. Let's give that a bit more range. And then wind the etherization back up. So you get the idea. It's an interesting effect. There you go. So the next parameter I'm going to talk about is the offset. Basically, where the movement controls give you a kind of automatic movement around within the buffer, the offset lets you control that manually. So let me just set a very small depth like so, and then we're going to choose a different sample so we can hear very clearly where we are in the buffer, because we're going to go with our old favourite.
We choose to go to the moon in this...
But in the right octave, I think.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade.
Like so. So if I just let a little bit of that play and then freeze it.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that...
There we go. So we've got that going on. So if we let that move around automatically.
But because they are hard.
There we go. Very, very slow JFK.
But because they are hard.
Anyway, that's not what I was trying to show you. I was just having a bit of fun there. There we go. Right, so now with the offset, I can basically control manually where I am in that history.
Easy, but because they are,
which is nice, and of course that would be a great thing to put under CV control, so let's do that. CV mappings, we'll use, what should we use? Let's use input 3, which is that currently, so we'll get rid of that. And then we'll put offset on input 3. Yeah. We'll take our CV output of our Tirana. And then just by... There you go, CV controlled, moving around in the buffer. But why don't we actually use the Tirana as a sequencer like it's intended? There we go, strange freeze sequence. So that's the offset control, which can be fun. So the thing we haven't talked about yet is pitch shifting, as well as time stretching. This will do pitch shifting. Now, it's not the last word in quality pitch shifting, but it can be a fun effect to apply if you wish. So there's a coarse and fine shift which applies to all four voices together, and there's also an individual control over each voice. So let's grab, should we try this with JFK? Let's see how that sounds.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other.
There we go. There you go, so you get the idea. So, and then like I say, I can apply this to different voices. Which voice is that? Voice 1.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade.
There you go, you get the idea. Crazy textures. So that's pitch shifting. So yes, that's the measure of it. You can freeze stuff. Let's freeze some other stuff just to kind of play ourselves out a little bit. Let's go with low strings, and then let's start really low. Still got my pitch shift on, so it's even lower. Where's it gone? There we go. Certainly sustained. So yes, that's probably enough of that. That's the Spectral Freeze algorithm on the Disting EX.